Welcome to the debate.
Hello?
Our focus today is looking back at a pretty significant period for the group, the Great Library Arc. This whole thing spanned from about June 2024 right through to April 2025.
Yeah, a long haul. And complex, too. We're talking multi-faction fights, dragons, custodians, golems, awakened aspects. I mean, really formidable stuff.
Exactly. So the central question we're wrestling with, looking at the source material, is really about performance. Did the group's actions during this Great Library Arc show, a successful, strategically masterful campaign? Was it defined by resilience, smart use of assets?
Or, and this is where I lean, did it actually expose some pretty critical tactical weaknesses? Operational fragility even, that was maybe just papered over by throwing immense, high-cost resources at the problem.
Well, I'll be arguing that it really was strategic mastery. You have to look at the end result, the ultimate triumph, the, frankly, maximal return on investment they achieved.
And I'll be coming at it differently. Yes, the financial returns were staggering, no doubt. But I think the arc really highlighted systemic vulnerabilities, operational failures that were only redeemed by, well, basically miraculous high-level magic.
Right. So from my perspective, the performance was honestly nothing short of exceptional. You can't judge success in an environment that chaotic by just focusing on minor bumps in the road. It has to be about achieving the biggest objectives against constantly escalating odds. They navigated what became this incredibly messy, multi-sided conflict. I mean, the records mention a four-way fight at one point between them, Dragonkin, Library Guardians, and the Custodians. And crucially, their resource management, specifically how they used unique items for, instant recovery. That was masterful. Think about it. After that initial setback against the ancient dragon that was, September 29th, they immediately used the gold ring to get a wish, regain their spells, then fully buffed, used the bottle mechanics. They were totally prepared for the final fight just days later. The outcome validates it all. Slaying the dragon, seizing the nexus, negotiating that modern settlement. That points to high-level competence.
That's an interesting way to frame it. Though I'd call it success contingent on survival mechanisms, maybe not strategic planning from the outset. I mean, if we look closely at the operational flow, the campaign feels defined by, maybe chronic mismanagement, or at least underpreparedness at key moments. The core issue for me remains the necessity of what I'd frankly call a magical bailout, just to keep the mission going. Success that forces you to burn the absolute highest tier of magic you have, just to reset the board, instead of executing a plan flawlessly. That's not mastery in my book, it's evidence of fragility, just barely covered up by having overwhelming power on tap. Let's ground this in the evidence, though. Even early on, against what you might call lesser threats, you see the strain. June 16th, 2024. They're facing just a strong force of tribesmen, right? And the logs say the party was already so depleted they had to rest for 6 hours, just so Andanor could get her items back. 6 hours of downtime against a relatively minor threat before they even got deep into the library's real defenses. That suggests to me a fundamental issue with resource allocation, preparedness, and it kind of foreshadowed the bigger problems later.
See, I'm just not convinced that focusing on, let's call it minor friction, really sets the right baseline for assessing performance in such a high-stakes, long-term environment. I mean, every campaign has operational hiccups. Surely, what defines mastery isn't avoiding hiccups. It's how you respond to potentially catastrophic failure. And they did face that. After that initial, really devastating setback against the ancient gold dragon on September 29th, the logs specifically note the group was weak and running low on resources. They faced a genuine crisis.
Right. They were beaten.
Well, facing defeat, yes, but they've responded not with a rout, but with calculated aggression, I'd say. They immediately secured that wish via the gold ring, got all their spells back. Then they used the complex logistics of the main bottle resource retrieval, which is not trivial, to fully prepare for the final confrontation just a week later. They literally transformed a potential rout into a decisive victory by deploying their most valuable assets exactly when needed most. That, to me, is sophisticated resource inventory management.
I'm sorry, but I think that framing fundamentally misunderstands the difference between just having immense resources and actually executing a well-planned campaign. Let's focus squarely on that point, the significance of the wish recovery. You argue it shows strategic foresight. I argue it proves critical failure.
Okay.
The use of the wish spell proves the party hit an unavoidable, critical failure point. Their tactical resources, their magical resources, they were completely exhausted. It was the emergency eject button, plain and simple. We aren't talking about using a healing potion here. We're talking about consuming a near irreplaceable ultimate asset just to erase the consequences of a near catastrophic encounter. No truly competent, strategically masterful campaign should ever require that kind of total reliance on an external, high-level reset just to keep going. Functionally, they were defeated on September 29th. The wish didn't win the fight, it just gave them a redo.
I would argue precisely the opposite, actually. Maybe using the language of, say, military logistics. Having a strategic reserve force, a powerful one, and knowing when to commit it is the hallmark of competent command. If the group possessed a resource like a wish spell and they chose the exact moment of their absolute gravest danger to deploy it, transforming what looked like inevitable defeat into, well, basically guaranteed victory, that is the height of strategic command. They leveraged all their assets, including, as you noted, the bottle for potions, and executed a perfect sequence. Catastrophic failure September 29th, asset deployment September 30th, total victory October 6th. A strategist judges the use of all available assets, not just the initial plan's execution. They recognize the need to maximize their investment to secure the primary target, and they did it flawlessly.
But this bleeds directly into my next point, which is about operational efficiency versus just raw resilience. You emphasize resilience, their ability to take hits and keep going. And okay, sure, they were resilient, but this resilience was forced upon them by frankly operational sloppiness. It wasn't built on robust planning. That early 6-hour rest just to recover basic items, the one we already talked about, that's not just minor friction to me. It's a profound diagnostic snapshot. It shows poor operational security, a failure to anticipate resource strain, even against what should have been, fairly routine security forces for a place like that.
That early example, though, you have to weigh it against the 10 months of continuous operation that followed. They successfully managed multi-tiered threats over that entire period. They handled everything from, yes, logistical annoyances like the erratic Sleech encounters in those mimic books, all the way up to high-level dragon spawn knights and really formidable casters. They showed sustained resilience by continuously pushing forward, even with noted setbacks. They didn't just pack up and leave. They adjusted, adapted, and they did succeed in their long-term goal, seizing the Nexus on November 17th. Competence in an extended campaign like this means adaptability and endurance, both of which they demonstrated over and over again.
Adaptability under duress isn't quite the same thing as strategic mastery, though, is it? We see these recurring themes of struggle against seemingly routine or at least expectedly complex foes throughout the arc. Think about the encounters with the awakened aspect Plasionic and the later fights against just general awakened spells. These show persistent, repeated vulnerability against specialized defenses, even after months operating inside the library. It feels like they were constantly playing catch-up, just relying on their immense raw power to brute force the consequences of their systemic mistakes. When power is the only thing masking chronic inefficiency, you have resilience? Yes, I'll grant you that, but you don't have operational excellence.
Power is a key metric, though, and leveraging it effectively to overcome unique operational challenges is resource mastery. But okay, let's move beyond just the wish spell and the combat logs for a moment. Let's focus on point 3, the complexity and scale of the final victory, specifically the negotiation phase.
All right.
If their strategy was just brute force, just smashing things, how do you explain the sophisticated non-combat outcome that really defined the end of the arc? My view of mastery is confirmed by the final analysis. They successfully secured the library's primary assets, culminating not just in a kill log, but in a successful negotiation with the Modrons. And that negotiation yielded a permanent item buff and a staggering 473,000 gold pieces in final loot. This massive ROI demonstrates their strategic foresight went far beyond just the battlefield. They secured their maximal objective through calculated risk and high-level engagement.
I appreciate you broadening the metric beyond just the combat. I do. But I have to question whether that negotiated outcome really erases the systemic tactical flaws that got them there. I mean, was the final dragon fight truly a measure of improved competence? Or was it just an endurance test enabled by that wish-fueled buff cycle? The logs are clear. They went from running low on resources to being fully buffed and spread out, specifically to tank the gold dragon's attacks. That strongly suggests resource inflation solved the problem, not some brilliant tactical shift. The victory was essentially bought by resetting their power curve, not by developing a new maneuver on the fly.
But tanking.
And furthermore, while the Modron negotiation, yes, yielded massive gold, we have to ask, were the Modrons negotiating with strategic finesse on the group's part, or were they just paying an exorbitant price to get this hyper-competent, incredibly resource-rich, and frankly, destructive group out of their dimension? The group was in a position of overwhelming leverage. Leverage secured because they brute forced the elimination of the Gold Dragon. So acquiring 473,000 GP might just be the payment of a ransom, enabled by the raw power they brought, not necessarily proof of superior negotiation strategy.
Look, tanking the attacks of an ancient dragon, even when fully buffed, is the strategically sound choice when facing a threat of that magnitude. Their preparation, which again involved flawless execution of the wish and the bottle logistics, wasn't just brute force, it was calculated risk mitigation. They maximized their defensive capacity to guarantee the kill, which they achieved. And let's not forget the 324,200 GP in Dragon Loop alone from that. And regarding the Modron negotiation, the ability to even recognize the value of the Nexus and then leverage their position to extract not just massive wealth, but a permanent buff that goes far beyond mere combat ability. They didn't just win the battle, they won the campaign, concluding the entire arc on their terms. That shows an appreciation for long-term strategic gain in complex asset management that, to me, defines high-level competence. They maximize the entire value chain of the library arc, from the first steps inside to the final political settlement. The ability to seize the ultimate asset, neutralize the greatest threat, and then monetize the entire outcome to the tune of nearly 1 million gold pieces total if you include the Modron deal? That is the definition of successful, masterful strategy. The end result simply validates their decision-making. So, in summarizing my position, the Great Library Arc was a strategic success. It was defined by the group's ability to overcome a truly devastating setback using unique, high-tier resources, and it concluded with maximal returns. They successfully transformed a period of extreme duress into an absolute windfall, seizing the Nexus, defeating that potent ancient dragon, capturing significant wealth and benefits, including that huge Modron payment. The end result speaks volumes about their ultimate high-level competence and foresight in resource deployment. It proves they're capable of operating and achieving objectives at the very highest levels of cost and complexity.
And I maintain that the massive success, while undeniable on paper, was highly fragile. While the final rewards were spectacular, yes, the tactical execution throughout showed deep systemic flaws. We saw forced rests against minor threats, and most crucially, the reliance on a wish spell to simply reset a crippling strategic failure against the ultimate target. The group succeeded, I think, in spite of its operational efficiency, not because of it. They demonstrated that overwhelming power can often compensate for poor planning, sure, but it doesn't equate to mastery. For me, the arc serves as a profound cautionary tale about how immense, high-cost resources can obscure, but perhaps not eliminate, fundamental tactical vulnerabilities.
And perhaps the true complexity here lies in how we even assess performance when things like high-cost restorative magic aren't available in known resource within the strategic inventory.
Exactly. Is it failure if you use the emergency lever you possessed all along to secure total victory?
Or is the failure inherent in needing to pull that lever in the first place?
Right. Assessing the Great Library arc really forces us to confront that tension between strategic resilience and pure tactical execution. There's certainly more to unpack there.